As indicated by declassified CIA records, the deep state made arrangements to totally demolish the Syrian government as far back as 1983. Reports got by means of the U.S. National Archives uncover nitty-gritty plans to militarily intercede in Syria with a specific end goal to secure their oil supply. Activistpost.com reports. Archives contained in the U.S. National Archives and drawn up by the CIA uncover an arrangement to pulverize the Syrian government backpedaling decades. One such record entitled, Acquiring Real Muscle to Bear Syria, composed by CIA officer Graham Fuller, is especially lighting up. In this archive, Fuller wrote, Syria at show has a hammerlock on U.S. intrigues both in Lebanon and in the Gulf, through conclusion of Iraq's pipeline, in this way undermining Iraqi internationalization of the Iran-Iraq war. The U.S. ought to consider pointedly raising the weights against Assad, Sr., through secretly organizing synchronous military dangers against Syria from three fringe states unfriendly to Syria, Iraq, Israel, and Turkey. Indeed, even as far back as 1983, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's dad, Hafez Assad, was seen as a gadfly to the plans of Western radicals looking to debilitate both the Iraqis and the Iranians and broaden dominion over the Middle East and Persia. The archive demonstrates that Assad and subsequently Syria spoke to a protection from Western dominion, a danger to Israel, and that Assad himself was very much aware of the diversion the United States, Israel, and different individuals from the Western settler coalition were attempting to play against him. The report peruses. Syria keeps on keeping up a hammerlock on two key U.S. interests in the Middle East. Syrian refusal to pull back its troops from Lebanon guarantees Israeli occupation in the south. Syrian conclusion of the Iraqi pipeline has been a key factor in conveying Iraq to its monetary knees, inciting it towards risky internationalization of the war in the Gulf. Conciliatory activities to date have had little impact on Assad, who has so far accurately figured the play of powers in the region and inferred that they are just feebly exhibited against him. In the event that the U.S. is to get control over Syria's ruining part, it can just do as such through effort of genuine muscle, which will represent a key danger to Assad's position and power. The creator at that point introduces an arrangement that sounds frightfully like those now being talked about openly by Western and particularly American corporate agent think tanks and private non-administrative associations who informally make American approach. Fuller composes. The U.S. ought to consider pointedly raising the weights against Assad, Sr., through clandestinely organizing concurrent military dangers against Syria from three fringe states unfriendly to Syria, Iraq, Israel, and Turkey. Iraq, sought to be progressively edgy in the Gulf War, would attempt restricted military, air, operations against Syria with the sole objective of opening the pipeline. Albeit opening war on a moment front against Syria postures significant hazard to Iraq, Syria would likewise confront a two-front war, since it is as of now vigorously occupied with the Bekaa, on the Golan, and in keeping up control over an unfriendly and unsettled populace inside Syria. Israel would at the same time raise strains along Syria's Lebanon front without really going to war. Turkey, enraged by Syrian help to Armenian psychological oppression, to Iraqi Kurds on Turkey's Kurdish outskirt regions, and to Turkish fear-based oppressors working out of northern Syria, has frequently considered propelling one-sided military operations against fear-based oppressor camps in northern Syria. For all intents and purposes, all Arab states would have sensitivity for Iraq. Looked with three pugnacious fronts, Assad would most likely be compelled to relinquish his strategy of conclusion of the pipeline. Such a concession would calm the monetary weight on Iraq, and maybe constrain Iran to rethink conveying the war to an end. It would be a honing hit to Syria's esteem and could impact the condition of powers in Lebanon. In this manner, Fuller frameworks that not exclusively would Syria be compelled to revive the pipeline of enthusiasm at the time, yet that it would be a territorial shockwave affecting the cosmetics of powers in and around Lebanon, debilitating the glory of the Syrian state and, probably, the mental condition of the Syrian president and the Syrian individuals, and additionally a message to Iran. The report proceeds. Such a risk must be fundamentally military in nature. At display there are three generally unfriendly components around Syria's fringes: Israel, Iraq, and Turkey. Thought must be given to arranging a solid military risk against Syria so as to incite at any rate some direct change in its approaches. This paper proposes genuine examination of the utilization of every one of the three states, acting freely, to apply the vital risk. Utilization of any one state and detachment can't make such a sound risk. The technique proposed here by the CIA is for all intents and purposes indistinguishable to the one being talked about by profound state foundation think tanks like the Brookings Institution today. For example, in the Brookings Archive Center East Memo No. 21, Saving Syria, Assessing Options for Regime Change, it says, Turkey's investment would be indispensable for progress, and Washington would need to urge the Turks to assume a more supportive part than they have up until now. While Ankara has lost all persistence with Damascus, it has made couple of solid strides that would expand the weight on Assad, and in this manner irritate Tehran. Turkish arrangement toward the Syrian restriction has really worked, experiencing some miscommunication with American endeavors to cultivate an expansive, brought-together national association. With an eye to its own residential Kurdish situations, Ankara has baffled endeavors to incorporate the Syrian Kurds into a more extensive resistance structure. What's more, it has obviously supported the Syrian Muslim Brotherhood over all other restriction gatherings. Washington must urge Turkey that should be all the more obliging of true blue Kurdish political and social requests in a post-Assad Syria, and to be less relentless on the supremacy of the Muslim Brotherhood. A few voices in Washington and Jerusalem are investigating whether Israel could add to pressuring Syrian elites to expel Assad. The Israelis have the area's most imposing military, amazing insights administrations, and distinct fascinations in Syria. What's more, Israel's inside administrations have a solid learning of Syria, and in addition resources inside the Syrian administration that could be utilized to subvert the administration's energy base and press for Assad's expulsion. Israel could post powers on or close to the Golan Heights and, in this manner, may redirect administration powers from smothering the resistance. This stance may summon fears in the Assad administration of a multi-front war, especially if Turkey will do likewise on its outskirt and if the Syrian resistance is being sustained a relentless eating regimen of arms and preparing. Such an activation could maybe convince Syria's military initiative to remove Assad, keeping in mind the end goal to safeguard itself. Backers contend this extra weight could tip the unjust against Assad inside Syria, if different powers were adjusted appropriately. While Syria isn't in struggle with Iraq today, subsequent to being devastated by the United States in 2003, Western Iraq now houses the bafflingly supported Islamic State on the outskirt amongst Iraq and Syria. That being stated, this arrangement isn't just being examined, it is being executed, as one can plainly observe by the way that Israel routinely dispatches airstrikes against the Syrian military. Turkey keeps on piping ISIS and related fear-based oppressors into Syria through its own domain, and ISIS keeps on introducing itself as an Eastern Front militarily. Accordingly, the multi-front war imagined and expounded on by the CIA in 1983 and talked about by Brookings in 2012 has worked out as intended and is going full bore today. The trail of documentation and the way in which the larger plan of world authority for the benefit of corporate agent premiums host proceeded with a pace paying little heed to gathering and flawlessly through Republican and Democrat organizations serves to demonstrate that changing gatherings and identities do nothing to stop the attack of government, war, and devastation being pursued over the world today and decisively as far back as 2001. In fact, such changes just show up in introduction of a considerably bigger communo-fascist framework that is settling in itself by the day.